We'll begin our analysis of the ratios for Coca Cola, stock symbol KO, and Pepsi Cola, stock symbol PEP, over the period 2012 through 2016 with the liquidity ratios. Now, liquidity ratios are meant to measure how well the firm can meet its upcoming obligations with its existing assets. The three ratios we'll look at, and there are a lot of other ratios out there, but these are the most commonly encountered: the current ratio, the quick ratio, and the cash ratio. The current ratio measures current assets divided by current liabilities. All right, current assets are the assets that are going to turn into a dollar during the upcoming year. Current liabilities are obligations that have to be paid with a dollar in the upcoming year. So this gives us a measure of money coming in versus money that has to go out. There's no such thing as a good or a bad ratio. I know some textbooks say, oh, this ought to be 2. It depends. It depends on the firm. All this tells us is that Coca Cola has roughly $1.10 to $1.25 of current assets for every dollar of current liabilities. And note that they're very similar between the two firms. So their current ratios, there's no real difference in there. And they're a little bit higher in the later 2 years. If we go looking at the actual financial statements to try and find reasons for that, it could be either the current assets getting bigger or the current liabilities getting smaller. If we're tracking this over time, these are my current assets. And these are the current liabilities for the two firms. So we're looking at the ratio of current assets to current liabilities. What we see here with Coca Cola, that's going 30 billion, 31 billion, 33 billion, 33 billion, 34 billion. But the denominator, 28, 28, 32, 27, 26. There's a slight decrease in the current liabilities and a slight increase in the current assets. If we go over here with Pepsi, we see that their current assets are getting larger, and that was mostly as a result of the cash increase. And their current liabilities were fairly stable. It took a jump in the latest year. All right, but the ratio is what we're measuring. So when you do see a change here, you want to go know why the change occurred. It isn't necessarily mean anything that the number's bigger. You need to know why is the number bigger. And what we can see over here is that between 2012 and 2016, you have a $4 billion increase in the denominator, and you have a roughly $1 billion decrease in had that backwards. You have a $4 billion increase in the numerator, the top number, and a $1 billion decrease in the bottom number, the denominator. That's for Coke. For Pepsi, you have a $9 billion or $8 or $9 billion increase in current assets, the numerator, and only a $4 billion increase in the denominator, which is current liabilities. All right, but still, when you see a change, you go looking for why the change occurred. All right, we also see that the quick ratio, adjusts the current assets by removing inventory, because inventory is is often an illiquid asset. Now, for some firms it's illiquid, for other firms it's not. And arguably for Coke and Pepsi, maybe depending on what those current assets are, if it's packing material and mounds of sugar, well, you could sell that anywhere. But if you got a firm like Boeing, where their current assets made up of inventory, the inventory is half of an airplane. Half of an airplane's very illiquid. So with some firms, we use the quick ratio to back out the inventory to see if there's a material difference. Neither of these firms has a whole lot of inventory, so we get roughly the same pattern in the numbers here. The cash ratio is cash divided by current liability, and current cash is what you actually pay for everything with. And so we can see here is that, remember, the current liabilities were dropping slightly, but they have a large amount of cash. And Pepsi, their cash increased materially over this period. All right, the cash at Pepsi went from roughly $6.5 billion to $16 billion, and it increased a bit for Coca Cola early on, but then it stayed up in the 20 to 22 billion period. So you had the increase in cash and slight decrease in the current liabilities. While with Pepsi you had an increase, or you had stable at about 17 to 18 billion, and then in the latest year your denominator, current liabilities, increased, but the cash gone up steadily, and especially in the last year. So that's what we're measuring with the cash ratio, cash divided by current liability. And again, if you see a change in the ratio, you want to go see why the change is. And for this big leap in the last few years for Pepsi, it's because the numerator, cash, has been increasing. The current liability has been increasing, but not near as fast as the cash has been increasing. All right, so those are three of the liquidity ratios that we often encounter out there in the financial world.